Curry Bowla. I mean, I've got a great team, and we are like the #1 restaurant in Zagreb. Out of almost 1,400 restaurants on TripAdvisor. Our hostel is the #1 party hostel. Our pub crawl is the #1 pub crawl in Zagreb. So whatever we do, we try to strive to be the best. So, and that really helps us to stand out.
Pozdrav svima i dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Liderovog podcasta. Današnja epizoda je malo drugačija od onih koje uobičajeno snimamo. Ne, i dalje je u pitanju poduzetnik koji živi u Hrvatskoj, ali je riječ o poduzetniku koji ne dolazi iz Hrvatske, tako da ćemo se od sada razgovarati na engleskom. With us we have Brian Senaratne, a serial entrepreneur actually that came from Šri Lanka in 2014 to start a business here in Croatia. Brian, it's nice to have you on the show.
Thank you, Roko. It's a very nice introduction. I'm glad to be here with you. Yeah,
I think it's probably been a really fun journey from 2014 to now, 2024.
Yeah.
So let's maybe start with that. Your origin story. Who is Brian before Curry Bowla and everything you do except Curry Bowla?
So Brian, born in Nigeria, grew up in Sri Lanka, worked in the Middle East, and now here I'm in Zagreb. Absolutely love the journey. My work has been mainly in IT. Spent all my life in Microsoft for 13 years actually, in the Middle East and Sri Lanka. And I came to Zagreb in 2014 and decided to make a complete switch, give up my suit and tie, give up my 9 to 5 and do something different. We started Curry Bowla in 2014. So a little short intro for Brian,
We're going to talk about Curry Bowla and many of other projects you're involved with. But 13 years in Microsoft. I know plenty of IT dudes and women in Croatia that really make a good living from working in IT, and they really, when they talk about their dreams, it's either making their own company, making their own software, exporting it, traveling the world, blah, blah, blah. Totally fine, of course, and totally ambitious. But also plenty of people talk about, this is the dream. I want to work for Microsoft. I want to work for Google. I want to work for blah, 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 huge companies. So I think you were in a pretty good position. Why did you decide to leave? And maybe what were the best days of your work in Microsoft?
Well, I started at the age of 20 working with Microsoft and its partners, and I can tell you I loved every day of it. It's not like something that I grew old and I'm like, oh, no, I don't want that anymore. It was interesting. I loved the job. I was not a technical guy. I was a sales guy. When I left Microsoft, finally, I was heading the corporate business for Sri Lanka and the Maldives. The whole part of it was like, I was 33 at the time. I was looking for something new in my life. And it was just, to be honest, it was just one very drunk night in Amsterdam that made me and my brother tick to get rid of the suit and tie and, get into the Curry Bowla restaurant.
How did your childhood look in Sri Lanka before you decided to leave, and why, from all of the countries you could have asked for or moved into, you picked out Croatia?
Okay, so that's generally the second question. Why did I come to Croatia? The first question people normally ask me is, can I have the menu? So because I'm working at Curry Bowla. Growing up in Sri Lanka, it was me and my brother. We studied together, we schooled together. We kind of also was working in this same building, literally, in two different companies. Sri Lanka was great. I had traveled quite a bit from a young age. We used to travel, and traveling was something that I really enjoyed. And Europe was always very fascinating to me. And how did I end up in Croatia is I used to work in Microsoft in the Middle East for 4 years. It was a stint there. And we used to report to the European Operations Center in Dublin. I was in Dublin for a conference, met a lady here, fell in love with the city, fell in love with her, moved here. That didn't really work out, but let's say I fell in love with the city after I moved here. And I absolutely loved Zagreb. I think it had a perfect balance between a busy environment and a very laid back environment. You have all these festivities and stuff like that, makes it really busy. So I enjoyed that part. And then, like I said, the whole idea to stay back in the country started when my brother came to visit me just before his wedding. So we had a little boys trip out. We were traveling and we were in Amsterdam. We had partied till 4 o'clock in the morning. I can still remember that day like it was yesterday. We were seated on the street, and so we were having a smoke, and we saw this wok restaurant. I think it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it was there was a big there's a big following there. People are standing there after partying and eating, and then it was just like, hey, what happens if we bring kotu? Kotu is Sri Lanka's most traditional food. What happens if you bring that to Zagreb? And that was a triggering point. And then, I kind of based my life here in Zagreb after that. So, yeah, that is the story, how I got here, why Zagreb and how I got here.
And it's super interesting because it's not so often you hear that somebody took a leap of faith and went from IT business to being a restaurant owner, especially in Croatia. I mean, owning a restaurant, I think mostly children think it's a good idea, I get to eat so much good food. I get to work with people I love, but it's a really tough job. What was the biggest motivational factor or even the emotional factor that made you want to leave the computers and work with people?
Well, I would say the restaurant, so to tread back a little bit, so I'm not a cook. I'm not a chef. I wouldn't say I don't know anything about cooking, but I'm very limited. I'm not one of those guys who will be in the kitchen for hours trying to create meals. That's not me. But I would say I did, after working almost 15 years in the IT industry, I was looking for something new personally. And the restaurant was, like I said, that moment just came up, and, we were like, okay, let's go grab it. And the whole process was thought through differently. We were not looking at it from a chef point of view, right? We were looking from a business point of view. And I was like, okay, so I was still doing sales. So I kind of had a good idea of dealing with people. I had a knowledge of processes and building a business. So we kind of put that into practice. And so dealing with people was definitely the plus point for me, So I enjoyed that, and the transition was great.
You could maybe walk me through how you created the Curry Bowl. I think people are gonna be shocked when they realize how much time it took for you from idea to, hey, we did this now. I'm a businessman.
Yeah, so it was. I know. I mean, a lot of people say there's a lot of bureaucracy and so on and so forth in Croatia. I think there is, if you do things correctly, you still can handle them well. So what was, the highlight of us opening the restaurant was from the day we signed the rental contract till the day we welcomed the first Curry Bowl guest to the restaurant. We did it in 7 days. Everything legally, everything following through the correct paperwork, and we found all the ways to process it, right? So it was definitely a very hectic period during those 7 days, but let's be honest, it was not just 7 days. Before we signed the contract, we were doing our studies. We were trying to figure out what should be done. We did our prep work and all of that. So, it was just following through all the steps, making sure everything is ready. And we had it in 7 days. A lot of people are still surprised that something like this can happen, but it is possible.
I think people are gonna be super surprised when I was when you sent me some more information about how you did what you did. What would you say are the biggest challenges when we talk about starting something from scratch, from zero to hero?
Okay, so you obviously, like everyone says, you have to be ready for the unexpected. I mean, right now we are in the renovation of restaurants. I totally thought we were going to have everything ready today, and something went wrong. So you have to expect the unexpected, but you also, I think, need to be have the will to keep pushing through. Perseverance is very important, and keep pushing through. So if someone is going to ask me, okay, what's the key thing? I think just the passion and the will to follow through, right? I used to give this kind of example as well, like when people ask me, how did you open it with 7 days? So I would go to one department and they would say, hey, you have to go to this next department with this paper, and then you will have to go to the next department with this paper, and so on. And I did that. I didn't stop after 3 departments, sit for a coffee and say, oh my God, they're sending me from window to window. No, I just kept doing it till the last paper was done, So yeah, so I would say sort of push through is a very important factor, yeah.
And how has life in Croatia been? I think that's a pretty frequent question you get,
Yeah.
but how did you accept Croatia, and how did Croatia accept you?
I think if I were to answer the latter, like Croatia really accepted me really well. They've been very polite. They've been very supportive of me. I've been, I really feel privileged at times. I mean, again, a few examples. So I can remember once, 16 or 17, I had to renew my terrace. Went with all the documents, and I was short of 2 documents, which is a very common thing in Croatia. People say, oh, you're always short of 1 document. And that gentleman saw the fact that obviously I didn't speak the language and I was struggling. And he said, just sit here. I will call my terrace archives and get them to email me the document, print it out, gave it to me, and said, okay, now you can go and submit it. So the Croatians have been fantastic, right? So I've been lucky that way. And as for the other part, how did I adapt here? I think one of your earlier podcasts, there was one gentleman who said there is a lot of negativity in Croatia. I wouldn't go to that extent. I would say, I mean, there's always a lot of people would say, hey, politicians are corrupt. I'm not endorsing any politicians. So I don't know anything about politics locally to say that. But I always tell some of the staff when I meet, I'm like, hey guys, you go in a tram, you don't buy a ticket. I deal with some people, they're like, hey, 200 euros for a bill, 150 euros for cash. And if you are doing that and you are kind of encouraging, I wouldn't say theft, but dishonesty in whatever way you do, how can you sort of discredit the politicians? What makes you think if you ever get there, if you are as a politician and you had someone come and say, here's 100,000 euros, can you approve my project? Why wouldn't you accept that? So I see a lot of younger generation who used to do that when I was at the restaurant, and, they're always like, oh, politicians, I'm like, why don't you do your part, So this was something that I found a little bit we'll say new to me, because in Sri Lanka, we go about doing our stuff because, we are a poorer country and, we cannot blame everyone else. We have to do our job, right? So this was something that kind of found me, thinking like, okay, why are these guys doing this without, actually doing the job they're supposed to do? And I can also remember, I think in 2016, I used to tell the young kids when they are always complaining about how the government is that, this is I think in 2015, there were 741 million people in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. And in India, there was 754 million that didn't have proper sanitary facilities. So I tell the guys, you need to be happy when you get up in the morning. If you can go to the toilet and brush your teeth, you're so much more luckier than anyone else, right? So this was one of the things that, I mean, like I said, I wouldn't say they're the most negative, but, this is some area that the younger generation could be a little bit more taken to a little bit more heart and be thankful for where they are. So I would say this was one of the things that got me a little bit thinking, yeah.
I think it works the same for either the younger generations or the older generations. I think somewhere in between is the best place to be at, because you still have that childish look on life, but you also have experience, and you realize that if you compare in the situation in which you are in with the situation someone else is in, you get to realize the situation here isn't that bad.
It's pretty good, I must say. It's very, very good. But yeah, it might be not as, grass is not as greener on the other side. Like, okay, you compare to Germany or Austria, whatever, but I think Croatia is a blessed nation in one way.
And what really interests me is how do you see Croatia as an entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the country?
Okay, so I mean, I think the private sector could be a little bit more hardworking in certain areas. Again, I could bring an example from a couple of weeks ago. So I'm building the restaurant, and my restaurant is shut down, and obviously there's various problems in the construction. And the contractors at 10 o'clock, they're having a pelin, and they're laughing, oh, poor Marlo, Brian, poor Marlo. I'm like, guys, you're having a drink here. I have 14 staff unemployed at home, right? So this is where, you need to push through sometimes. I would say this is some of the challenges there is. But there's a lot of opportunity in Croatia. I really think there's a lot of opportunity in this country, especially in the tourism sector. I'm sure in other sectors as well. But in everywhere I venture or everywhere I look, I think there's a lot of potential there.
And you're also included in the tourism sector, since you are the probably first non-European board member of the Zagreb Tourist Board. Because actually, I'm gonna let you say it. How are you connected to tourism?
Yeah, I just found out today that I'm the first non-Croatian to be included in the Assembly of Croatian Assembly of Tourism. So apart from the restaurant, we also have some hospitality objects such as hostels. So we have 2 hostels in Zagreb, which probably is the most amount of hostel beds, and a few apartments and stuff like that. So and that has been like in 2017 we opened one, and 2021 we opened one, and I think I came to Croatia at the right time, right? I really did. It was just booming, and hard work paid off. We put in a lot of effort. The country had so much opportunity. I got a lot of help from all the people around, and I think I was at the right place at the right time. Yeah.
And now I think Croatian businesses are booming, especially from all the European but also foreign money pouring in Croatia. And we really have an opportunity to make a mark on European economy in the next, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years, let's say even more. And there are plenty of foreign workers coming in from India, Philippines. How do you comment on that? As you also arrived from Sri Lanka to work here, but how do you comment on this mass porridge of foreigners working in Croatia?
I mean, it's a mixed bag, right? For me, so when I came in Croatia in 2015, I can remember I used to walk down Kalčićeva, and people would actually stop me and they would take a picture and they were like, okay, where are you from? There was brown skin was a novelty. And during the last few years, obviously, like the entire world, the hospitality sector just lost all its workers. What happened was when Corona happened, everyone obviously needed to find themselves a job. They self-employed themselves, and they just disappeared. So this resulted with a massive influx of workers. Now, I would go on to a little bit to say that there is, I don't know if you're aware of it, but this is like modern day slavery. There's a lot of human smuggling happening, right? I've been firsthand, because we had the hostel during the pandemic. We had, at one time, there was this one Bangladeshi guy. He would call and say, I'm sending you 50 people at a time, and they would be in your hostel for 5 days. And they would go to their employees. And after a little while, we could see that these 50 who are coming, not all of them are going. So what is happening is they had paid 5,000 euros each to come here, and some of them didn't have jobs. And they just stuck in the hostel, right? So this part of it is not very good, So I think there should be some control, someone to look into. In the same time, without these people, we wouldn't be able to function today, because in 2022, we were paying like almost 2,500 euros for a waiter in Zagreb. So the business couldn't survive with that kind of, So we have brought in a lot of people for the hospitality sector and the construction sector, which is desperately in need of people. But I think there has to be a little bit more administration on that, just to make sure people are not exploiting it. So, yeah, I would say this is how I see the two sides of the story of this mass influx.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those people had to be employed because in order to make the economy work, you need to shorten the wage and increase the productivity.
Yes.
But even the agency owners in Croatia, I mean, renowned agency owners are talking about the same issues as you are. So I think that's fair to say, especially in a public space such as this. But let's head back to business. So it was IT, 13 years Microsoft, Curry Bowla, and I think there's a fine line in everything you do, and that's the motivation, like the internal motivational factor that makes you want to be the best at what you do, and like a natural sense of expanding. So let's elaborate on that, because you didn't just open a restaurant. You kind of entangled in anything and everything.
I mean, so obviously, I mean, like most people, I mean, we want to be the best at what we do, right? So we're very fortunate. The Curry Bowla, I mean, I got a great team, and we are like the #1 restaurant in Zagreb. Out of almost 1,400 restaurants on TripAdvisor. Our hostel is the #1 party hostel. Our pub crawl is the #1 pub crawl in Zagreb. So whatever we do, we try to strive to be the best. So, and that really helps us to stand out. So we really put in an effort for that, and that's my mindset. So whatever we do, we try to be the best at it, and the team I have around believes in the same mantra. So it kind of works out well for me to push that through. Yeah.
And what's your advice to younger kids just starting out as entrepreneurs, trying to make a business out of something? How to increase profit, how to increase quality, and how to make your product or your service stand out?
So you obviously need to believe in it. You need to believe in what you want to do, right? You have to be you must have a single focus, like, okay, what are we trying to do? If you try to put profit first, and if you're trying to do short-term, I wouldn't know how to advise you on that, because that's not where I believe that by focusing on something wholeheartedly and, making sure you give the best experience, if it's like, especially in the hospitality sector, making sure the guest is the most important person, the profits will come, right? And then obviously you need to look after your team. For me, I'm no one without my team. My team, I would say quite literally, is the #1 team in Zagreb. That's why we are the #1 restaurant, right? So the team needs to believe in it. You need to believe in the team, and it's about working with the right bunch of people, and the kind of people that believes in your same story. It doesn't have to be the right story, but it has to be, they all need to believe of what you think is correct, or your vision. And then it's much easier for everyone to row towards that same target, So I would say that that would be probably the advice I give the younger generation, whoever wants to start something.
Curry Bowla is a franchise now, actually.
Yeah.
So let's do a role play. I'm an entrepreneur from, let's say, the Netherlands. I live in Amsterdam, and I'm really interested about your project. We met like 7 years ago when you were drunk with your brother on his bachelor's evening. And I maybe want to do business with you. I maybe want to open your franchise in Curry Bowla in Amsterdam. Why would sell me it?
Okay. So simply, curry is something that is trending. If you look at TripAdvisor, and I go back to TripAdvisor all the time, because that's the kind of clientele that we are looking for, right? We are not a Michelin star restaurant or whatever. So if you look at it, curries in almost every city, there's 1 or 2 curry restaurants in the top 10. But if I ask you, can you tell me a curry franchise? It's going to take you some time. If you say franchise, you'll have burgers, pizzas, chicken, and all that. But curry is not something you have at the top of the mind. So this is where we see the gap. So we see that people like curry, but we don't see that in the franchise segment. The main reason is because curry is a complicated cuisine to scale. Now, this is where I come, right? I'm not a chef, so I have no skill to boast about. My only skill is on processes. So we simplify the whole process. We have just 5 curries. We do it repeatedly well. That's why the guests love us. and we do it in a way that is profitable and it's easily scalable. So we can bring you a restaurant that you will stand out. And you most likely will say, if it's Zagreb, or if it's Croatia, or even if it's Amsterdam, that's highly unlikely you're going to find another curry restaurant on your street. So it's much easier for you to perform and stand out than being at just another burger restaurant or just another pizza restaurant on your street. So this would be, I would say, our number one USP.
Okay, I might buy.
Let's do it.
It's a super nice pitch also. But yeah, I see your point of view, and I completely respect it, because you cannot look a business. It doesn't matter if you're a restaurant owner. You can't look at it only as a chef. You can employ a chef, but you have to be a businessman. And this was a really good business pitch. What's your business philosophy? And does it intertwine with your private life philosophy?
Yes, to an extent. I mean, for me, winning at all costs is not an option. You know, I don't like that. Yes, I will do everything possible to be the best I can, but there are certain guidelines or certain lines that I do not like to cross. That might delay my victory, but I want to be able to, I personally would want to enjoy my victory when I get there. So I always try to be correct when possible, as much as possible, you know. So it's tiny lines. Like, for an example, this is the time of negotiating with all our suppliers for next year. So common question I have from all suppliers is, okay, what did that other person give you? I will give you better. I'm like, I can't do that for you, because I was being on the other side, right? I used to be a sales guy, and that would really annoy me if my price was given. So I always say, give the best price possible, and let's see who is good. So these are some of the philosophies I try to do correctly, you know, and that is something that, like I said, it might take me a little bit more time, but I enjoy to do things correctly.
How did your emotional state change from working for an employer in the IT sector to being an entrepreneur and a founder?
Well, in Microsoft, as a sales guy especially, I think the mindset is still the same. You know, you have to deliver 110%. You know, there is no like, oh, it's 5 o'clock. You know, my shift ends. So I think, in a way, now that you brought it up, yeah, maybe Microsoft really drilled me into being an entrepreneur, because it's like a one-man show for whatever you're doing. You know, so you have a very clear target on your head, and if you don't achieve it, you know, you're out. So I think that way it didn't change much for me in the role I was in, you know, because I was a salesperson. Yeah.
Since we're a short format podcast, our time is running out. But I wanna give you a chance to maybe be the bearer of good news, some exclusive news from Curry Bowla. What can we expect in the future from your brand?
Yeah. So we just signed up our first franchisee in Zagreb. Two young gentlemen from Zagreb. We'll be opening up on the west side of Zagreb. And for us, the one key thing here is we are not just a typical franchisee. We're just starting up. So we don't only just give you, we'll say, the franchise manual. We guide you through everything. So right now with these guys, we are even working with the banks to get them. I'm helping them find the right contractor. Helping them find recruit staff. So I'm kind of giving 110% of the package, right? So we just started with this, and we have a lot of inquiries currently outside of Croatia, from Macedonia and from Kako and so on. And right now we are also trying to push to the Croatian market, especially on the coast, because we certainly believe, I mean, tourism is a big thing in Croatia. And, you know, if you go on the coast, you have, I mean, the offering is like, you have 20 pizzerias, 20 fish restaurants, and 20 kebab shops, you know, and you don't have anything like a curry. You go and put a curry there, and you're going to be standing out there just because you're curry, right? And we also know how many British tourists comes here. And we know what British tourists' number one food is. It's not fish and chips, right? So for this reason, the Curry Bowla franchise is something we're just launching, and we really believe that Croatia has a big potential here, and we're looking forward for that.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Brian, and I hope you managed to create a global brand out of something that came from Sri Lanka to Zagreb, then worldwide. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Dame i gospodo, bila je ovo još jedna epizoda Liderovog podcasta. S nama je bio Brian Senaratne, zanimljiv poduzetnik sa još zanimljivijim životnom pričom. Iz Šri Lanke do Zagreba samo mu je nebo granica. Za sve nove epizode, naravno, ostanite s nama i nastavite pratiti Liderov podcast i sve ostalo što radimo. I naravno, pretplatite se upravo ovdje. Pozdrav i do sljedeće epizode.